middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives.
Hey, right. Hey, come out. Right. Punch, man. Right. Circle left.
Stand still, huh?
Get ready. 1 o'clock. Oh. Good. 12. Oh. 5 to 3. I got mixed up.
There is no way that you could have been as bad at hockey as you are at golf.
All right, let's go. You like that, old man? You want a piece of me?
I don't want a piece of you. I want the whole thing.
Ooh, you see the thread running through there? Fights and stuff.
It's the new...
It's like you and I fight over these things.
Well, we've christened the show Cinemaniacs. I'm Mark.
I'm Tom.
And we are the Cinemaniacs.
Speaking of old guys who fight,
yes,
I wanted to take a brief non-political comment and say how unfortunate it is that America lost a true patriot, not being, metaphorical or anything like that or overplaying the term, but with John McCain. I am not of his party, but I learned over the years to really respect the man as a true patriot and somebody who stood for what is the greatest things of America. So it's unfortunate that we lost him, and I hope our leaders will take after him a little bit more than they have been.
Out of respect for that which you just said and the man we lost, I will engage in a personal moment of silence while you talk about the next film because I didn't see it.
Well, fair enough. Then we'll move on to... it's a bad time in Puppet Land because occasionally some of them are starting to get knocked off. Some of you may know, some of you may not, but Melissa McCarthy decides to take her badge and her gun and look into the Happytime Murders.
Treat the family.
Hi.
We're back.
Discussing technique. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
How are you? Happy time?
You're probably better than I am. Since you didn't get a chance to see this, I've really learned to like Melissa McCarthy. I'll go see a movie because she's in it, because she's done a couple of things that I really thought were funny. You and I have commented several times since Identity Thief about how, boy, I wish she'd take something truly dramatic on, because there was a brief scene, a 1-minute scene in there that she was really good, and it ended up being comedic. This was not it. This was not her dramatic turn, and obviously it isn't supposed to be. But the premise of this, not the premise being the murders of the, there's somebody knocking off puppets, truly Muppets, come on, we all know they're Muppets.
And this was actually made by the Muppet people.
Yes,
so this isn't like a Muppet knockoff. It's not a Muppet brand, but this is the people who bring you the Muppets brought you filth.
Right. So you're not seeing Kermit, but you're seeing Muppets.
Right.
Come on. And so they start getting knocked off. And the conceit of this, for positive or negative, is just be foul-mouthed as much as possible. Have the Muppets saying the F word and spewing all sorts of Muppet bodily fluids all over the place. And I went to see this really intentionally lowering my bar and saying, okay, I'm going to go along with it. And it was just way over the top. It was way too much. And I was not too crazy about Happytime Murders.
I did not see this, partially because I chose not to do so and partly due to timing. I will say, if this looks interesting, there's a film I would recommend entitled Meet the Feebles, which is probably far grosser and dirtier than this movie was, directed by Peter Jackson. It's a dirty puppet movie. Puppets in the real adult world being real adults. There's also a 70s, I don't know if I can say this title, I'll spell the last word. There is a 70s adult film that was all done with puppets entitled Let My Puppets C-O-M-E, and that's also out there if you want to delve deeper into the treasures of puppets being flarney. So I didn't see that, but I did see the next film. Mark Wahlberg, Ronda Rousey, and Maggie from The Walking Dead, whose name escapes me, but I'll say it when we get back from the clip, are people who are cast to protect an asset and get them, they need to run a gauntlet 16 blocks or more and get the asset to mile 22.
So Mark Wahlberg back shooting, not killing people.
Directed by Peter Berg.
Yes.
Who did,
they seem to be a team kind of anymore. They've done 2 or 3 movies
Lone
now.
Survivor was one.
Patriot Day.
Day. I forgot.
And Lone Survivor, and the one on with the oil rig that.
Deep
Deepwater Horizon.
Our memories are doing real well.
Yeah.
So anyway, Peter Berg likes to do very militaristic, boom boom, shoot 'em up, real world based rah-rah movies. And this is another one of those. So basically, I wasn't good with the intro because I'm tired. It was Wahlberg heads like a black ops. You're off the books. You don't exist. Kind of high-tech black ops. Malkovich is the person who oversees it from afar with a whole bank of computers and people who can control various street lights and drones and things like that. And basically, these badass people go into a situation, have to get somebody out, and not leave much damage in their wake if they can. So the story is that there's an Asian operative who is defecting from his country and has the codes to unlock the location of this unobtainium that's going to blow stuff up somewhere, and it's a ticking clock, and it's screenwriting 101 and all that. And so basically, this movie is getting this guy from point A to point B. Well, all these kind of crazy bad guys want to kill him. So you've seen that before. Unfortunately, you don't see much in this movie because it's all shaky and cut really badly. They have a really good Asian martial artist who at times you see do fragments of things. You're like, man, this guy's, I thought for a brief moment, I'm like, did they get Tony Jaa for this movie? This guy's really good. And it is so badly cut and shot that I'm just like, oh, maybe I should leave now. So Wahlberg is kind of bad in this. He's very cheesy. He's supposed to be this mad genius who has this rubber band around his wrist that he snaps to focus himself because his mind races. And not racist, but racist. Right. And he spouts all this very verbose dialogue that feels very much like it's something he memorized from the script as opposed to that it's flowing from him. The film is framed with him being interviewed by somebody, like a debriefing. He's like, sort of a you can't handle the truth kind of attitude. You don't know, these I'm going to slow down. Snap. I didn't like it. You couldn't really see what was going on. Wahlberg seemed really cheesy. Lauren Cohen was cool to see her in something that's not Walking Dead, and she can be badass and all that. But there's so much cheesy hack screenwriting and cliche in this movie, and you can't see the damn action, so I didn't really see any point in it. If you're okay with not being able to see what's going on in a movie and like modern action movies that do that, then you'll probably like this because the pace is consistent from the get-go. There's not a lot of downtime in it, and it gets you right through. It angles real hard for a sequel, which almost made me laugh at the end. I'm like, really? I didn't want one of these. Anyway, what did you think of Mile 22?
Basically exactly what you said. I thought some of the action, the martial arts stuff, there were moments where, wow, it's just really impressive. I wish I could see it. And we were just in too tight, and it was cut in kind of improperly. Wahlberg's, and I think this was the writing probably, and not necessarily his acting, but the intentional multi-layering of his quirks was distracting and didn't benefit the character. The storyline is flush with double agents and triple agents, and oops, this turned out to be this guy, and we suspect this guy, but it turns out to be somebody else. So much so that, and I can follow those kinds of things, like the latest Mission Impossible in many respects was like that. But that one did a good job planting the seeds of evidence so that once the reveal comes out, you go, oh yeah, now I can see that. And this was just kind of like, oh, surprise, it's this guy, oh, it's that guy. The action was good enough. I ended up being disappointed in this, but not thinking it was probably quite as bad as you did, but not nearly as good as I expected it to be.
One thing I will say, though, about that martial artist is that he was just like affluently insane.
He probably
with his
got paid
moves.
a tremendous amount of money.
Probably did.
Which is also the case with many of the folks in the next movie that we're going to be talking about. Your family's got loads and loads of money, and you're maybe from the Orient, but be careful bringing in somebody maybe of a lower class that your mom might quite like, because we know perfectly well that, it may not be racist or not, but you got to be careful who you bring into a family of some crazy rich Asians.
Accidentally pull a speaker loose, please turn it in at our snack bar or box office.
So based on a book, apparently.
I guess.
Which is always news to me because I don't read fiction really. I really like this quite a bit.
Yeah.
Looking at the trailer, I'm like, okay, this is going to look pretty, and I love Michelle Yeoh, so that's what I'm going in for. But it also looked like it was going to be one of those things that was just like getting off to affluence and aren't the rich great and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't that at all. You really are. The storyline again is this normal woman, college professor woman, falls in love with a guy who she doesn't know too much about his background, and then she finds out he's like from the wealthiest family in Singapore, and she's thrown into this, and like, how do I deal with this? And they don't approve of her because she's not pure. She's American Asian and not that. So there's all kinds of cultural things. But ultimately, people are people, and no matter what shade you are, you're going to see stuff you recognize in these families and how they interact with each other. Ken Jeong is in it, which I did not know that going in, which was pretty cool. The movie is beautiful to look at.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nicely shot. It's the locations. It's the decor. It's the houses. It's the clothes. It's everything. It's not. And looking at the trailer, I figured this might be one more for the ladies than the guys. But Cricket and I saw it together. We both liked it a lot. So I would pretty highly recommend Crazy Rich Asians. And in going in, I knew they would be rich, and I knew they would be Asian. But nothing prepared me for just how crazy they would be. Sorry.
Well, see, I was thinking they're crazy rich.
Yes, that is
like
what it is.
unbelievably rich.
But it goes both ways.
Yeah,
actually.
it goes both ways. So that was kind of fun. I had the same reaction. I went in expecting very little, thinking this was just going to be a one-off to capitalize on kind of the influx of Asian influence in these films that are, certainly not taking over the world, but we've commented several times lately about how there's that aspect that's blending into quote-unquote traditional Hollywood films.
Asia
so you can
is
appeal.
this huge market, so
Right,
they're starting
absolutely.
to market more American stuff for that.
Right, so you can market it here, you can market it there, you can market it everywhere. But I was really surprised at the performances were really solid. I was worried, and you talked about this off air before as this was running, I was worried we're going to have the real stereotypical, hate this guy, don't like that guy. And I thought everybody was, for the most part, it just gets back to me for performances. Performances were solid. The story was real solid. I was worried this was going to be a silly, maybe Romeo and Juliet kind of a knockoff, and it
Cinderella
wasn't.
story or something. No.
Right, something
No,
like
that.
that.
Lead character is very grounded in reality and likable, and
Yes.
you're with her the whole time.
Yeah, and that's the
so's
thing.
so's the boyfriend for that
Right,
matter.
so you like both of them. I enjoyed the whole thing, and as you said, I just thought it was beautifully shot. I'm looking at the locations and saying, I wish I was there so I could go dive.
And I think it's also in Singapore, which is not a location we see a lot.
Right.
You tend to see Hong Kong or other places, so that was kind of cool. And great to see Michelle Yeoh in a movie that's this popular, where she's not jumping a motorcycle onto a train.
Sounds like we're going to be seeing more of her, though.
That's what I read. She just got a big film deal to develop more films, so I hope she does, because
Yeah.
I've loved her and her
Yeah, she's
work
terrific.
for 20-something years. So, speaking of the Colonial Theater in Keene, who's our sponsor, and we thank them for that, here's what's playing this week at the Colonial. It is a documentary that I'm told, because I didn't see it, is mind-blowing in the whole truth is stranger than fiction arena, and this tells the tale of what happens when meeting up happens to three identical strangers.
Show starts in 8 minutes. Yum, yum.
I think we're going to have a tough time at Best Doc this year because we've got this, which was just terrific, RBG, which is going to come out on video pretty soon, Won't You Be My Neighbor? It's been a great year for docs. This one was, again, and they play up, just how mind-boggling it is. The trailer, we see a guy showing up at a high school, and people keep thinking, oh, it's this guy, what? And he's, what in the world is going on? So it truly is an amazing story that I did have to do some research afterwards to find out this really did happen. It's very well shot, very well put together, and it's just unbelievable that these three people eventually got together through the very strangest of circumstances. I thought Three Identical Strangers is one that was just terrific. I think it'll work just as well, not to dissuade people from going to the Colonial, because I always like things on the big screen. But I think this one will play out very nicely on home video when it gets there as well.
I can't wait to see it. I sadly doubt I'll be able to see it in the theater this week, but it is there until Thursday night, I believe. So that's all we have to talk about in theaters. We now briskly move along to that which you can watch on the home video. Let's just say format of your choice for brevity.
There you go.
First up is a film. Is it my turn?
You can do it if you'd like.
Well, this camera's on me, so why not? Hi. Ryan Reynolds returns as everybody's favorite merc with a mouth in a film cleverly entitled, being a sequel to the first one, Deadpool 2.
Wash, make it look like new. Watch it in the car wash that lets you see right through.
So we split on the original Deadpool.
Yes, I did not like it much at all, but I was completely unfamiliar with the character.
Right.
So what I disliked about the film was exactly what everybody loved about the character.
Mm-hmm.
His smarminess and his self-referential comments and things like that.
I loved the original. That's
Okay.
one of the few movies where I was laughing out loud during the opening credit sequence. And I like this one a lot too. I agree that sometimes the self-referencing can get a little tiresome, and the writing has to be sharp.
Yes.
Because if you have somebody who thinks they're funny and is not and keeps doing that kind of humor, it gets grating really fast.
Right.
So that's kind of what I and probably others worry about if we see a third Deadpool, which is financially it's inevitable because these movies make so much money. If you get a lesser writing team, or if the guys who wrote the first two run out of steam and you're cracking wise every 5 seconds and it's not funny, that's going to be a painful and tough slog pretty quickly.
Right.
So in this film we have a Cable character who comes from the future to
It's
kill
Josh
Deadpool.
Brolin week
And
here at
it's
the
Josh Brolin,
Cinemaniacs.
yeah, a.k.a. Thanos, a.k.a. Brand from the Goonies, a.k.a. W. And he's a one-eyed, one-horned flying purple people eater who comes from the future to kill people and cause havoc and wreak havoc, and he can control time and all that. And Deadpool throws an X-Force together of misfit superheroes from the cast-offs of the X-Men, and they go and they create hilarity and carnage. It is extremely violent.
Yep.
It is extremely profane in every way a movie can be profane, yet still get an R rating. It is not a movie for kids. When I saw this at the Alamo, they had a sign in the window that said, "Seriously, leave the kids at home. This is not a movie for kids." I thought it was very funny. It was a hell of a good time. It helps if you know the Marvel movies and if you
Right.
know the DC movies even vaguely, because there's a lot of references to other superhero stuff. It's like what Python used to do. Python on TV would play with the conventions of TV, and on record they would play with the conventions of a record. Deadpool plays with the conventions of cinema, blockbusters, and superhero movies. So again, it's more of the same. It's funny. It's touching at times. I quite liked it. But what did you think?
Well, I have to go back and see why, because again, I mentioned why I didn't like the first one, completely unfamiliar with the character, and everything I disliked about it was exactly what everybody loved about it. Because I liked Deadpool 2. For some reason, it caught me at the right time.
I wonder if now you would like the first one. Because you know
That's
what
why
it
I want to
is.
go back
Yeah.
and take another look at it. I found fewer self-referential comments. In the first one, he makes fun of Ryan Reynolds, and I'm like, come on.
There is one in the end credits that's kind of funny.
I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So for some reason, as a guy who didn't like the first one, I thought Deadpool 2 was kind of fun. I did find myself thinking, do you really have to go that vulgar? Do you really have to go that profane?
Yeah.
But it's a huge crowd pleaser, and I'm sure we're going to see Deadpool 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 eventually coming along. I've always liked Ryan Reynolds, and so it's nice that he has a character that he can kind of get into. So yeah, ultimately, as somebody who didn't like the first one, liked the second one.
So I'm going to graciously allow you to introduce the next film,
Well,
which is probably the worst film I've seen this year.
Well, that's good. So I can kind of be nice about it. We'll have to see eventually. But Max is a Rottweiler police dog who this guy is just tough as nails, and he won't take any stuff from anybody else. He has to kind of primp himself up and be very hoity-toity, along with his partner, to go under cover and find out what's going on with a lot of crimes happening as he enters a pageantry of show dogs.
Comes from Mars.
This was awful.
At whom was this aimed?
I saw this in the theater back when MoviePass worked, so I didn't pay for it technically. But it is completely unfunny.
Yeah.
It is the dialogue. It was just like it was all temp dialogue. It was not funny in the least. I don't see how. I guess kids would find it funny, maybe because it's talking animals and.
Well, but
if
they're
it's
not
an-
going to find the storyline all that funny.
It's a street dog that has to go undercover as a show dog, and Will Arnett's its partner, and it's one of the worst things I've seen in a long time, and I don't really want to talk much about it. I have to say it's awful. And then they have like fake outtakes at the end that are entirely created, and those aren't funny.
Yeah, that's obvious, yeah.
And then they angle really, really hard at the end for a sequel. Ooh. And they do one of those like, I don't remember if there was the sound of a record scratch at the end of the movie, but it was like a surprise, and then somebody winked into the camera and it irised in, and it said, this was awful.
Yeah.
It was the worst thing I saw in the movie theater this year.
I agree completely. There's no reason to say anything else because you're exactly right. We will have to talk about this, though, early next year. If we do our best and worst.
We will.
And you can decide on which side it is, best or worst.
This movie, it felt like it went on forever.
Right.
Oh, is it me? Sorry. I'm setting myself up for a crime I didn't commit. Speaking of crimes Thanos, the hand of fate, the fist of vengeance, is just wreaking havoc to the universe and the world and everywhere. And only one team of all-stars can attempt to stop him. And it's going to take a real long time because this is the Avengers Infinity War.
Wonderful idea.
New hidden magic with conditioners. The first rich hairspray.
But how does it end?
yes.
We're going to tell you. Okay, we're just going to cut to the chase. Everybody gets ice cream.
That's what Thanos is bringing, right?
Exactly, because you need a big fist because you put a cone between each set of fingers. So this is the culmination, it turns out, of 10 years of Marvel films. This was the 10th anniversary film. I don't really think it was intentional, but while you watch this, if you know the Marvel movies, these little light bulbs keep going off, and that they tie things into like every character in every film as though they had a master plan to get it all up to this point.
Right.
Just like Lucas did when he wrote Star Wars, right? Wink. So it is a big, grand scale. Everybody's in it. Everybody gets screen time. I think the movie did a really good job of balancing all of these characters, which a lot of these don't.
I disliked about so many of the early ones, the early Marvels, is that we go to see, I'm really a Captain America fan, I'm really an Iron Man fan, and somebody gets the short shrift.
Civil War was an Avengers movie.
Yes, absolutely. And this is a long movie that does a great job of not being boring and spending the right amount of time with everybody.
And it's very funny at times.
Yep.
It's very, it has a huge sweep. It's very epic at times. It's very sad. When I saw this movie in the theater opening night, people were gasping and like saying no at certain parts of the film. It really, and I'm just like, you've never seen a movie before? You think any of this is finite? Anyway, despite the title. So anyway, I thought it was really good. It was really cool. It probably means not a heck of a lot if you've not seen many of the other Marvel movies, but it is a de facto Guardians 3 because they're in it quite a bit too. So I won't say a lot more about this. I mean, is what we say going to matter if somebody's not going to go? Would we?
Nobody's going to it or not going to it based on what we say. But I rewatched this with my younger son a couple of nights ago and was struck by, one, how long it was, but two, how there's not really a slow moment. It doesn't get terribly boring. They balance everything pretty well. It's fun to see all these things tied together. I think if you hadn't seen any of the other films, you'd get it, but you're not going to get really why this works as well as it does. I thought Infinity War was a terrific film, a culmination of Marvel knows how to do it. DC, sorry, my former employers.
They did once.
Doesn't know how to do it right. They've done one or maybe two fairly well. And Marvel knows how to do it well. If you even spend a modicum of time thinking about the end of the film, you know how the next one is going to play out, but that's okay. I don't think it matters, and I really ended up enjoying Infinity War.
That Thanos, he really is a malcontent, isn't he?
He is, isn't he? You have to be sure then, if you're Thanos, that you don't park your car at a certain restaurant because a couple of the employees are going to take a little joyride. They'll find out where you live, and while you're eating dinner, they're going to go help themselves to your house. Unfortunately, one of them finds out that as he's looking through a house, there's somebody else there that he didn't really exactly expect. And we find out that the owner is really a bad Samaritan.
Old Milwaukee tastes as great as its name.
So you were real high on this in the theater. I didn't get a chance to see it in the theaters.
Moderately buzzed about this in the theater.
Okay.
Yeah. I saw this in the theater. I didn't know what it was. And I was out of town, and it was a theater that plays to what I would call obscure releases. And I saw it blind, which is the best way to see anything, but I prefer it. So I didn't know
at least you could listen to it if you were blind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just did not know.
The sound design was terrific.
Didn't know who was going to be in it. Or maybe I knew David Tennant was in it.
Okay.
I guess I read that much, and I didn't know what it was about. So I think this is a decent little thriller.
Okay.
It's the kind of movie that I was surprised I saw in the theater because there's no major name.
Yeah.
It was done by, I think was it Dean Devlin? It was somebody who had done blockbusters before. And it's just an efficient little thriller that works.
Okay.
It's the kind of thing that made for what was me a decent matinee, a decent rental, something that you come across on cable and watch, and it passes the time, and at the end you're like, wow, that was effective. When you said guys stealing cars because they're valets at a restaurant, I totally forgot about that aspect of the movie. So it's drifted out of my mind. But Tennant is always great. Arguably the best Doctor Who. Tom Baker fans would probably put their dukes up about that, but younger people feel like he's the best Doctor Who they've seen. Interesting to see him in a movie, and I don't have a lot to say about this other than it's the less you know going in, the better, because there are some shocks in there.
Yes.
And it's efficiently well made. I mean, it's a decent little flick.
Yeah, I thought I was of two minds on this one. There were aspects of it. Why is our main character? Why are it seems our two main characters from Scotland? Or that they're at least foreigners.
The main guy
and
is, yeah.
They have this weird accent that seemed to have absolutely no point. Now I know, as you say, we don't need the faux American accent, but I just thought that was strange, and it took me aback for a while. It took me about half an hour to realize, oh, that plays no dramatic importance. Right. There are lots of little quirks of our bad Samaritan. And like there's a scene where just to show that he's crazy, and we know he's crazy, but there are just a couple little instances where you can see him he's starting to go off, and he gets control, and that's just kind of silly. But overall, there were moments of startling tension, great suspense. So ultimately, I ended up really pretty much liking Bad Samaritan, despite its kind of moments of quirkiness.
I feel like because our lead is somebody we've never seen before, at least I don't think we'd ever seen him before, I did get the feeling with this movie that he could die.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Tennant might get away with this, even right up to the end. I wasn't totally sure. Like if it was, a major actor who was our hero, you know he's going to be okay. But when it's somebody you've never seen before, I feel like it can go any way.
Right. I was troubled by. Clearly, and they have a throwaway line toward the end of how our bad Samaritan can do all of these things. He's phenomenally wealthy, as it turns out. But I thought it was Batman, because he has all of these gadgets and gizmos in these rooms that can suddenly disappear. And anyway, so that was on the bad side of it. Ultimately, I think this is worth a watch if you like tense kind of suspenseful films.
Worth a rental, as we used to say.
Yes.
In some would say happier times. So now, up next is a film I haven't seen, so let me take a crack at remembering the synopsis that I just rudely looked at while Tom was talking. So Jim Carrey stars in a film in which a series of murders are being perpetrated, and clues to who might be the perpetrator, the perp as it were, if you're in the biz, may be found in an old book. These are all, my friend, very, very dark crimes.
That leaves you with a nice, warm glow.
You cannot handle the truth.
So I like Carrey. I can't think of a movie where he's been bad. So in seeing this trailer, and I just kind of found it online, I don't think this got theatrical release. Ended up renting it and watching it. It looks really slick. It's very good looking. But it's like set in Denmark, and Carrey has this strange accent that. And because I think he's a big enough star that I have trouble losing him in the character, no matter what the character is. And so I'm just wondering, why do you have this weird accent that's just kind of oddball? It opens in like a brothel where there's all this gratuitous sex going on that ultimately has no point.
But if it's in a brothel, it wouldn't be gratuitous there.
No, certainly not. I guess not so. And so all of this interplay, I kept thinking back to the number 23, if you remember that. And that's all set in a book. We may have a picture. I don't know.
Sometimes it's behind us.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. This time it isn't. But it felt very much like that, with the idea that there are plants and information in this book. So that kept coming back, and I have trouble wondering why somebody along the line, either Carrey or the filmmakers, didn't realize the connection and modify that. Ultimately, I thought Dark Crimes was not worth its rental even.
Interesting. It looked interesting.
It's very good looking, and he's good, but it's the story just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, speaking of not making a whole lot of sense.
Yes.
That's it.
My knees are prepared.
I have no.
My
it's the Arrow
side
Video Corner.
is prepared.
That was fantastic timing. Wow.
It was.
You would think I'd planned
very
that.
Good.
As if we plan anything on this program. So up we have 2 titles to discuss. The first of which is actually a package with 3 titles in it, and I'm going to briefly glance over my shoulder at the filmmaker's name because I couldn't be bothered to remember it. It is Moshen Makhmalbaf, probably mispronounced, the Poetic Trilogy. It is a set of 3 films released in the 90s into the 2000s. I believe he is. I'll look this up while we're running the clip.
I think it's an After Effects add-on, Moshen Makhmalbaf.
Moshen, it might be copywritten. So anyway, here is the trailer for one of the 3 of those films entitled The Gabba, which I'm probably mispronouncing, and then I will come back and tell you about all 3 films in the set.
Because they taste delicious. And give you vitamins and protein, too.
Hi, I'm just telling him how cool this movie was.
Indeed.
So I'll tell you the order that I watched them in, the order they're in on the disc. So it's 3 films from an Iranian director. It's called the Poetic Trilogy because these films are very poetic, magic realism. They're not standard narrative films. They're much more arty films from Iran. And this is I Generally Walk, but once in a while, I really had to go, so I ran. So the first film is titled The Gabe, and it is about this. It opens with this couple in a small, you think Iran. And
are they interlinked?
These 3 films are not connected in any way. You think Iran because you're ignorant, and you think desert.
Right.
And this is a lush landscape, lush rivers and streams and mountains and grass. It's an old couple, and they're washing this traditional Persian rug that they have that shows this little scene of a man and woman on horseback in the mountains. And as they do that, this figure of a young woman, everybody's in traditional garb, this young woman appears and starts talking about her life. She sort of embodies the rug. This sounds weird. She embodies the rug. She sort of embodies one of the characters on the rug, and she tells the story of her life. And then we go off to this mountainous land where she and her people live, and they talk about a celebration they have where these women weave these rugs. It's way better than I'm making this sound. It is beautiful to look at. I was just watching this, I'm just thinking, this is just rather wonderful. It's pretty, and it's poetic, and it just kind of flows along, and it's not very long. It's subtitled. It's about 70 minutes or so.
Okay.
And so that's The Gabba. That's really lovely. And then there is a film called The Silence, which might be the one I like the most. It's a straight narrative film about a little boy who's blind, and he and his mother are about to be thrown out of their apartment, and he has to go find money somehow.
Is this set in Iran as well?
They're all set.
Okay.
2 of the 3. This one's set in Iran as well. And he winds up befriending a little girl and riding a bus, and winds up being working at a factory that manufactures an Iranian musical instrument, sort of like a guitar. And he helps them tune the guitars because his, the sense of sound is so much better for him hearing.
Oh, great. Okay.
So it's basically the story of this little boy, and as he goes through his little world and trying to, make money and just live a life. And again, there's not a lot to it, but it's really interesting to watch. It's really cute and funny at times, and it's just lovely, and it's nicely shot again. And for those who like music, that flows through this. There's the traditional music of the place and the instruments that they use, and you see these young boys who work at like a kettle drum factory, and it's just interesting. And again, as something that is near to my heart, it's about 70 minutes. Because honestly, if you told me the plot of these movies and you said it was 2 hours and 45 minutes, I might not find time to watch it.
Sure.
And then the third film is entitled The Gardener. This one's a little weird. This one reminded me of a Godard film that I saw from recently. It's a documentary, and it's kind of a documentary. It's sort of a documentary about this filmmaker and his son making a documentary about these people who are into the Baha'i religion.
Okay.
But a lot of it's them filming each other, filming these people, and having philosophical discussions about religion and things like that. So it's not shot anywhere nearly as nice as the other 2. It's okay, but it looks like it was shot with DV cameras. Like it kind of looks like film quality, but it's not as lush in the visual department.
Okay.
And a lot of it is just people talking to each other. You do see these temples and these people going about their religious rites and talking about, they're speaking their piece about their beliefs and all that. And this one, I didn't get into that one quite so much. I'm sure there's an audience for it. It's just, I was digging the first 2 movies, and this third one was so different that I was just like, it could have been more like the first 2. But that's just me. It's an Arrow Academy release, so obviously these look as good as they're going to. The clip we ran for the Gabba, this copy of Arrows looks a million times better than that trailer that we found, which is actually the official one that Arrow put up. And there's a lot of documentary material, none of which I was able to watch, but interviews and retrospectives and analysis of this filmmaker and his body of work. So I look forward to going back to that and finding out who this person is, because I'd never heard this name or heard of these films before. Yeah. And I was actually, because these look so good, when I watched The Gabba and The Silence to see when they were made or when they were released, it was like the mid-90s, early to mid-90s, and they looked like they could have been done yesterday. So the person's been around a while. Okay, so that is the Poetic Trilogy. Up next is a film by a filmmaker you probably have heard of. Do you love the Time Bandits like I love the Time Bandits? Perhaps you're a Fisher King person. Maybe you're a Lost in La Mancha person.
If you want to go see it, you could go to Brazil.
Maybe you could go to Brazil to see this. They have it everywhere. It's Terry Gilliam of who got to start with Monty Python, who's directed many films. This being one of them. This stars. It doesn't star Jeff Bridges. I'm actually going to look down here out of respect for the child actress because she was quite good. Jodelle Ferland, who's I don't know if she's done anything since then, is a little girl whose parents are played by Jeff Bridges and Jennifer Tilly. They're drug addicts, and she goes off on her own to find mystical wonderment in the family of Jeff Bridges, and it's called Tideland.
Wide open style that really lets you have it. Schmidt, Big Mouth.
Looks like Gilliam.
It is Gilliam. This is small scale Gilliam. He didn't have a lot of time or money to make this film, so it's not as giant in scale as it usually is. And basically the idea is this is a little girl who is creating a fantasy world to escape from the harsh reality that she finds herself in. So she befriends these strange people who live in the houses or landscape nearby where her father has basically OD'd in this abandoned house. And the little adventures and whimsical world that she creates with these people. And it's very Gilliam. It is very strange. It is creepy and disturbing, which is why people like Terry Gilliam.
Right.
It looks fantastic on this Arrow disc. It's a movie I only knew the title of it before. It has a lot of supplemental features. There's an hour-long making of done by the director of Cube, which is a movie I like a lot. Where it's on set, it's the production, it's a lot of interviews with Gilliam as things are going. You see how things don't go well and how he deals with that. A lot of period interviews and EPK stuff, and I believe there's a commentary as well. So it's a very loaded release of a film that I think most people never saw. I don't put it at top tier Gilliam, but I did enjoy it. It was cool to see, and it's nice to see in a package like this. So that is now out for you to exhume and consume, which is a very ghoulish thing to do. So that's all the time I think we have, sadly. We're going to be gone next week because it's Labor Day and we shoot on Monday, so we can't be here. But in 2 weeks, we will be back with
Kin
and other things.
Yes.
Until then, I'm Mark.
I'm Tom.
And we are
the Cinemaniacs.